Okay, so it seems like a lot of people have been discussing this entire Hemomal situation. And sorry I got the name wrong in the first video. Again, obviously, a lot of people have very different names and different ways of pronouncing them. But essentially, there was a Google Doc which came out exposing essentially Sykkuno for a bunch of kind of stuff, including talking to a lot of smaller creator women and, you know, being a very, you know, obviously there's a lot of relationship stuff and talking about, you know, potentially moving in with him and getting a cat together and all this kind of stuff, all while he had a girlfriend and all of this kind of stuff, which of course, you know, is absolutely terrible. And there's been a lot of people talking about it. And if you guys want to go back and look at exactly what has went on with this Google Doc, you guys can go back and watch my other video on this. We went through the entire thing. And of course, essentially there was one thing though that people have been kind of looking in upon, which is obviously this kind of Google Doc thing here, where essentially within the Google Doc, she talks about talking to Bao. Obviously Bao, someone who was in a little bit of controversy a couple of months ago to do with some tweets that she made, which everyone you know, kind of called her a misandrist and all of this kind of stuff. And obviously there wasn't any context behind this with the whole Sykkuno thing. But obviously, you know, they say here, Bao told me that at the end of March, Sykkuno's girlfriend reached out to her regarding a controversial tweet Bao made last year. She asked Bao if it was true that the tweet was about Sykkuno. And obviously the tweet that they're talking about is this one right here, which is, if you're an up-and-coming female content creator with a small but growing audience and a much larger and successful male content creator approaches you out of nowhere and showers you with attention on stream and DMs, etc., don't walk, run. And obviously this got a lot of backlash because, you know, many people were like, you know, it's not all male not all male creators, sorry. It's not all, you know, and sometimes even female creators can do it, which is true. But obviously she was referring to a very specific situation, which obviously we didn't really know at the time, because of course, reading it back now, this 100% is to do with Sykkuno, right? This is 100% talking about what he was doing and showering them with attention, you know, obviously giving them a lot of money as well, and of course a lot of other stuff. But again, this was 100% talking about it, but at the time, nobody knew this was talking about a specific situation. People just thought she, you know, was being, you know, pretty against like men and stuff like that, which again, you know, as I said, without the context, you know, some people, you know, it did get mad, right? But of course, this ended up being spotted by a lot of people, especially within the space, including obviously Rima saying, holy, Bao's controversial tweet in October was actually about Sykkuno. And obviously, yeah, people were just beginning to realize, right? Saying, was it about Sykkuno or was it about Mizkif? Although I guess by default, it applies to both. But this is why vague posting helps no one. And I do think that is 100% true, right? I think there is 100% this kind of sentiment as well of, you know, if she was a little bit more direct about what she was talking about, or maybe didn't post it at all until obviously this came out, maybe she would have gotten a lot less backlash and there would have been, you know, no controversy because, you know, obviously vague posting about things and not really, you know, saying exactly who is it, you know, what did they do, etc., etc. It can annoy people, right? And obviously, without the context, people don't know what the hell you're talking about and think it's just a general kind of thing about men, when obviously she was specifically talking about Sykkuno, which only we found out today. So again, I agree with them there. I honestly think it's about whoever Bao wants it to be, just to hate on men. See, didn't she say in the reply it was about Mizkif, which obviously, yeah, in the reply it says, just because I don't include every single nuance exception, possibility and variation does not mean we're still having the same conversation. Stay safe, gang. Obviously, Sean Doe putting truth impact. Get down, Madam President. So again, a lot of people have been, you know, talking about it, but again, I don't know if it was referring to Mizkif or referring to Sykkuno, but as you know, people were saying, it could apply to both. But obviously within the Google Doc itself, they also talk about the fact of them asking whether it was about Sykkuno, right? They say, Bao told me at the end of March, Sykkuno's girlfriend reached out to her regarding a controversial tweet she made, and apparently they called and Bao explained to her the other woman had confided in her about experiences with him. So she was talking about Sykkuno. That is confirmed that she was, right? And it could also fit into the narrative of Mizkif, or the Mizkif stuff was going on at the time as well. So of course, potentially she was talking about both of them, but obviously she was, you know, making the statement with the knowledge of the experiences that she had with these women, coming to them about Sykkuno and, what he had been, saying and all of this kind of stuff, right? So she 100% had him in mind whenever making this, whether it's a kind of if the shoe fits kind of situation, it could be, but, it is very clear within this Google Doc that, she did know about Sykkuno and what was happening behind the scenes. And there was even more stuff to go on about this. Obviously you got Ariasaki as well saying, appreciation post, I hope Bao's VTubers pockets are always full, air forever fresh, heart and belly is full. I still refer to her tweet and it's given me strength to stand up and reevaluate myself multiple times since. Obviously supporting the tweet there. And obviously as well we got Aru here, Deputy Aru. Obviously some random person just posted saying, oh, that's another big content creator getting cancelled for things I got in hot water in for warning my friends about years ago. And obviously Aru says here, this is so wild to read because literally everybody knew. So apparently, and obviously it was kind of hinted at within the actual Google Doc as well, a lot of people already knew that this was going on. People had already cut connections with him. Some people weren't interacting with him as much, but obviously he is such a large creator and a lot of people like him. He managed to stay in the position where he is, right? Of course, that is essentially what has happened. It seems like this was known to a lot of people, and also it's further backed up by the case of, for example, we know obviously Bao made the tweet knowing about it, and obviously that tweet was made when back in October 2020, back in October 2025. So again, he's known about it for quite a while, as well as there was a Mujin video that came out as well, which he released literally like half an hour afterwards. And obviously the difference between me and Mujin, right? Mujin, I released mine about 20 minutes after his. But obviously Mujin like heavily edits his videos, so he had this like pre-done, right? Whereas mine is quite easy because I don't really edit too much within my video unless it's like audio, levels, whatever. Whereas he actually fully edits his videos, so of course he knew about this beforehand. I don't know how early. Obviously, it could be a while. It could be not too long. But obviously, it seems like they've been in contact with Hemomal. So I keep getting it wrong. They were in contact with them, or someone at least involved with the case. Maybe even Bao, because of course Bao actually did end up reposting Mujin. Obviously, kind of saying to all the victims, just talk about it. It's safe to talk about it, right? As well as reposting a lot of other people and their experiences, which we will go through in another video tomorrow, talking about some of the people that have come out and talked about Sykkuno and their own experiences. A lot of VTubers involved in that as well. And obviously it says exposing Sykkuno is serial cheater, and obviously they reposted the original Google Doc, which obviously was out as well. So yeah, Bao has obviously been supporting that. And yeah, obviously she knew, seems like Mujin knew for at least a little bit. I don't know how long he knew for, but obviously we know that Bao knew at least since October 2025 that something was going on, right? And maybe it got worse over time or whatever, and more people probably came out and things, which obviously then led them to making the Google Doc and all of this kind of stuff, right? And obviously Aru saying that she knew, again, it doesn't have a time frame on how long she's known. But again, she's known as well, and apparently a lot of people knew that this kind of stuff was going on, and that this was either at least a rumor, a minimum that was going around. Obviously, say, bro, I had creative. Obviously, this is a follow up, by the way, on this reply here saying, bro, I had creator friend groups not even connected to VTubing that had their own stories about him. I was like, oof, he is so cooked. Literally any day now, someone is going to say something, so it finally happened, I guess. And so, yeah, apparently, I don't think it was supposed to be, I say supposed to be, I don't think it was anything specifically to do with VTubing. Obviously, yes, a lot of the people involved are VTubers, the original Google Doc and all that kind of stuff. But I'm pretty sure he was just going for smaller creators in general, whether it's VTuber or not. So again, obviously that is a fact, right? Obviously, it seems like a lot of the women that he was speaking to were all smaller creators, which again, I think that there has been a lot of kind of discourse as well within the actual original Google Doc reply. Some people obviously, saying it's nothing, right? Whatever, move on. Read the whole document, yeah, move on. Dangerous predator. Maybe some people can argue over the kind of the labels that they're saying. Obviously, they're saying serial cheater, which I think is true. Master manipulator, again, you could argue whether that's true or not. And dangerous predator, again, you could argue whether that's true or not, right? And again, I definitely do think it is up to some people and how they define things and whatever, as to why, some people maybe don't agree or whatever. Now, obviously, some people are saying, oh, get over it and that kind of stuff. I definitely don't think this is something to just get over, right? I definitely do think this is a warning to a lot of other people out there. I don't think this is necessarily, you know, oh, they're just trying to essentially cancel him, right? I don't think that is the case. Obviously, that's probably part of it, but there's also the case of letting other women know that, hey, this person is doing this, because of course there can be murmurs in the background and things, but not every smaller creator is going to know that. Obviously, the fact is he has been going after smaller creators, right? And the fact is, in these kind of circles where people are rumoring about it, they are usually bigger creators or sometimes lucky people that get picked up. And obviously, if he's going for smaller creators, they're not going to be in those circles that are talking about it, right? They're going to be a small creator doing their own thing or whatever. He messages them and they don't know anything because, again, they're not big, right? They don't have those connections that maybe some of the bigger creators that knew, you know, have. So again, there is that kind of element to it as well, to essentially warn people that he is going around and doing this, and to, you know, not fall for, you know, this kind of behavior, because of course, you know, people don't want to be kind of led on like this and be infatuated with him when, you know, obviously he apparently has a girlfriend and, you know, it doesn't actually really plan to follow through on some of the kind of things that he's talking about, obviously, like, you know, moving in long term and all of this kind of stuff, which seems to be the case, right? So I do think that this more so is a warning as well, not only just an expose of Sykkuno, but also a warning to other people that have been involved. And that is also evident by the tweets by, for example, like Mugen, obviously the one that Bao reposted here, saying, you know, to all of the victims worried about backlash, don't be, you know, they're all the same accounts. And this platform makes it seem like they have a voice by consistently pushing negative replies first. It's all noise. I encourage you to speak about your experiences. Obviously, talking about a lot of the negative replies that, you know, the Google Doc and stuff is getting in terms of people saying, oh, you know, it's a nothing burger or whatever. Now, again, you could say it's a nothing burger, like in the sense of like, I don't think there's anything like illegal that has gone on, which again, if you only care about the legality of stuff, then sure, right, maybe it's a nothing burger for you. But I do think it is definitely a case of a bigger creator exploiting their kind of bigness, I guess, is that a word? Their kind of popularity, that's it. To kind of, you know, coerce smaller streamers into, obviously, you know, getting into certain conversations, romantic interests, and all of this kind of stuff with him, which of course is something that does need to be kind of pointed out to a lot of people that potentially could be the victim of this in the future, right? And of course, maybe you don't think it's the worst thing in the world that some guy is you know, quote unquote a player or whatever, and you know, you can have your own opinion on that, but I do think it is important to talk about and at least be you know, have people aware, because some people do get heavily affected by this, right? Some people who get led on and kind of, you know, told this kind of stuff and you know, genuinely think that they could genuinely be in a relationship with Sykkuno or whatever in the future. You know, some people get properly hurt by that and properly kind of, you know, I don't know, they kind of get too, not too emotional, I don't know how to describe it, like they get very emotional about it and it can affect them, right? It can affect you a lot if you have been kind of subject to this, especially whenever you think you're the only one that is talking to him and whatever, and that he doesn't have a girlfriend, that he's single. It can, you know, the reality of it can sometimes be pretty crushing to some, and obviously that does affect them pretty heavily. So again, you might think it's a nothing burger because you haven't been, you know, sexting Sykkuno, right? But again, the people that have been talking to him and whatever, of course, are going to be very heavily affected by this. So I can understand why they have, you know, been so emotional and you know, have been, you know, have decided to put out this doc and everything like that, because it is a big deal. I feel like it is a big deal for a lot of women, smaller women creators in the space, because they don't want other people to be taken advantage of like this in a way, right? And I think that is essentially it, right? So again, obviously, as I said, we will cover a lot of the other stories that people have coming out with him, because again, obviously, it's not just the two people involved within this Google Doc. There is more people. So that is something to be kind of clear about there. So yeah, if you have seen any of those posts as well, you know, I will be covering a lot of those. And yeah, it just seems like this has become a pretty big situation that has been kind of murmuring in the background for a little bit now. And it seems like this is the culmination of it. This is what has gone on. And I've even heard rumors about stuff to do with Sykkuno and things. Obviously, you hear rumors about streamers all the time, right? And a lot of the time, you just got to go, yeah, like, I don't, you know, I'm not going to believe it until I see it, right? And obviously, this is the see it kind of moment, right? Because I've heard things about Sykkuno before. I've heard things about him, you know, being weird, potentially. But obviously, you know, it's all well and good someone telling you something about a streamer, but let's be real, you know, some random guy, you can't always just trust some random guy saying like, oh, he did this and that and whatever, because again, it's just like, it's rumors. But now we have the proof, we have the evidence, we have the video of them, you know, talking and all of that kind of stuff. So again, that is going to be a pretty big, you know, situation, a pretty tough time for a lot of the people involved. And yeah, I mean, it definitely does suck that all of this has happened. But yeah, that's essentially all there is for this. I just kind of wanted to cover this because obviously a lot of people have been talking about Bao and her kind of involvement with it, or her kind of, you know, tweets and stuff, because I did think it was pretty interesting. But yeah, if you guys did enjoy this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, go to GameSubs, use my code Kaza, get 10% off. Again, they've got a ton of really cool stuff over there. Definitely recommend checking it out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. That's all. See ya.